We should be live now, Chair.
Thank you. I presume it's okay to carry on from now. Got everybody here? Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Corporate Parenting Committee meeting tonight. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and the press who are watching by the live stream of this meeting via the Council's YouTube page. Due to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely. A decision summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the Council's YouTube page. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the committee to keep their video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting and keep their microphone muted except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function in the participant's screen. This is sometimes a blue hand, sometimes a yellow hand. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then remute again to allow the officers to respond. And also remember to please lower your hand as well. As with all new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there is always a risk that we may run into technical problems. And I would ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such times as it can be reconvened. Thank you very much. I'll now go into asking for a roll call. Could I ask members of the committee, if they're here, unmute yourselves, respond and then remute. So if I can start with Councillor Ayres.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bashir.
Present.
Councillor Bond.
Present.
Councillor Harper.
Present.
Councillor Haynes.
Present.
Councillor Jones.
Here.
Councillor Lane.
Present.
Councillor Robinson.
Present.
Councillor Yazin.
Present.
And I myself am Councillor Bisbee. Officers in attendance tonight are Nicola Curley. We have Fiona van der Hout, Ricky Cooper, Shalina Chandu, Mariah Ali, Catherine York, and Dr. Mona Aslam. The others in attendance from the Foster Carers Forum are Stephen Green and Sue Stepney. And we thank you for your attendance today. I would now like to move to item 1 and ask Karen, do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have no apologies for absence.
Thank you. Item 2 is members' interests. Does any member wish to declare or disclose any pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest that is not already recorded? If so, can they please raise their virtual hand? I don't see any hands raised, so we'll move on to the next item. Item 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of November 2020. Members are asked to approve the minutes of the meeting held on Wednesday, 25th of November 2020. I would like to propose that. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have anybody with any other corrections or anything? No, I don't see any hands, so we'll count them as correct and proposed and seconded and move on to item 4. Item 4 is an update from the Foster Carer Forum. Can I ask Stephen Green and Sue Stepney to please present their report? Thank you.
Good evening, Councillor. I've got the report. I'm going to just mention a couple of things on there. One of the ones being is before Christmas, we asked Finance if they could bring the payment forward for carers to give them longer to get presents and that, which they did. And I know that took a lot of work for them to have to do it manually. So from the Carers Committee, I'd like to say thank you very much for that. That was a really welcome by the carers. Also, what we have asked for is going forward, if special occasion payments can be brought forward by 2 weeks, because carers are buying online at the moment and it takes longer to get stuff online. So we'd ask if the birthday payments, the Christmas payments, the special occasion payments can be brought forward, and that's something we've asked for, and that's being looked into at the moment. And one of the other things I'd like to bring up from the report, I mean, the report's there, I'm sure of what they want done here, is about vaccinations. The carers were offered vaccinations by PCC, and that was the carers really valued, that made the carers feel really valued. Because again, you know, every carer was offered to have a vaccination. Most carers have took that up, I know of. I personally have had my second vaccination already. So for me, that was really a value that made carers feel valued and, you know, like supported. So I was really pleased to say thank you for that, for PCC agreeing to that, because not many councils have done that. And the report's there. Is there any questions from the report? Has anyone got any questions from the report at all that I'd like to ask?
Thank you. So, does Sue want to add anything to that before we go to questions?
No, I think Steve's covered it all that was discussed, and it's in the report.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? I have Councillor Ayres with her hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment more than a question, actually, over the point that was raised in paragraph 413 about foster carers transferring to Cambridgeshire County Council. And I see that these allowances are now aligned, which I'm very delighted that isn't happening any longer. In other words, everybody is just working within the local authority, presumably where they live. But anyway, if you wanted, I didn't know if you wanted to make any comment about that, whether that was worked out well for everybody or not.
I mean, it's still happening at the moment. We only had 3 sets of carers that moved to Cambridge for different reasons. And at the moment, I know they're looking after Cambridge children. But as we go forward and the departments or the authorities are being aligned, that's why now there's only 3, and no one else can move to Cambridgeshire anyway. That's been put on hold now. But there's only 3 sets of carers moved.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for the question. Councillor Yasin.
Thank you, Chair. My question refers to point 4.5.2. And my question is, how can we work with young people who may be hard to engage with to ensure that they attend the appointments for the assessments? Thank you.
So I didn't quite catch it. Sorry, can you repeat that? I do apologise.
No worries. So 4.5.2 refers to non-attendance at appointments. And it says that one of the reasons that it could be is that a young person may be hard to engage with. So how can we work with those young people to ensure that they are attending appointments?
I think a lot of obviously every child has a social worker, but as they get older, they get obviously a PA, and the PA is a lot closer to the child, and they only work with the child. They don't work with the carer. So I think, you know, I haven't seen that become a problem previously. And you know, I've got some 17-year-old that engages, and I think it's just keeping them informed. A lot of the times decisions are made for the children, and the children aren't, you know, privy to that. And something I'm pushing for is that, you know, every decision that's made for that child, they are included and are privy to everything that happens to them. So they feel included. Once they start feeling included, then I believe that they'll engage better.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. Nicola Curley.
Thank you, Chair. So I was just going to make a brief comment about the allowances changing, but I might just come in on that second issue, if I may, as well. So just to be clear, I'm really pleased that carers in Peterborough are feeling that they don't need to move to Cambridgeshire anymore. That was the whole idea, to try and equalise the offer. And we have got a report later on for the committee that gives a bit more detail about that. But just to be clear, that obviously carers can choose to move and can obviously go anywhere. So we can't stop a carer if they want to move to different areas. So just to be clear, what I think we're hoping now is that our offer is the same across both local authorities, and that we're offering a really good service to Peterborough foster carers, and that will only continue to improve as we go along. I think possibly Councillor Yasmin is referring to a later report about, you talking about initial health assessments, Councillor Yasmin, and people want to engage with those. Yes, so that's why, so I'm sure Stephen's right, but I think that's why he was, because that's not in his report. So I think what, and I'm sure again, we can talk about that, Catherine York can pick that up a bit later on as well. But I think what we found is that, yes, particularly older young people are not necessarily thrilled about a health assessment, and they don't really want to do that. I think what we found is sometimes the virtual engagement now that we've been able to offer. So one of the unexpected byproducts of the pandemic that's been helpful is that actually for some older young people, they have actually engaged much better with a virtual appointment around their health, rather than having to go and see somebody and fit that in. So we are hoping it's better, but there are some young people who just don't want to do that, and in the end we do need to accept that. Okay, so just to I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Ayres, is that another question, or is that a legacy hand?
It's a legacy hand.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. So I don't see any other hands raised. So can I thank both Stephen and Sue and the rest of the fostering team, well, carers, that have put this report together for us. It is appreciated, and I'm sure the comments from the team about getting the vaccines, etc., are really appreciated. So thank you for that as well. And so we'll now move on to item 5, and that is Children in Care Council participation reports. So can I ask Shalina Chandu and Maria Ali to present their report, please?
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to highlight a few points from the report that's been submitted. So firstly, in relation to the coming into care packs, we've been collating feedback from young people and children, from social workers and from carers about these, so we can share that with the Children in Care Council. They intend to review the packs and the response to them in their April meeting. So some of the feedback we've received so far from children has been that they loved the teddy bear and the stress toy, that the water bottle they found very useful, and also that some of them have been starting writing in the journal, so we know they're useful. They also thought that the getting to know you game was a good idea. We've had feedback from a foster carer who was very impressed with the getting to know you game. They thought it was a non-invasive way to find out about the children's likes and build a relationship. And feedback from social workers has included a comment that the pack includes little gifts, which are a nice touch to the child to have something of their own when going through such a traumatic time. During lockdown, we've been holding virtual events for children and young people, and these have been well received. You have details of some of those in the report, and we intend to hold face-to-face and virtual activities during the Easter holidays. Finally, I just wanted to highlight that young people were involved in a recruitment panel, selecting newly qualified social workers for the assessed and supported year in employment. These were places for Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, and in the end, 29 applicants were interviewed by 13 young people over a period of 3 days. The young people had some training beforehand, so we helped them develop a scoring system and a bank of questions, and they told us they very much enjoyed the process. They felt they were making a difference, and importantly, they said it showed them that their opinions are important. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Does Maria have any thing to add to that?
Maria isn't present today, Councillor.
All right, thank you. So I'm looking for questions. I have got Councillor Jones, if you'd like to go first.
Thank you for that, Shalina. Just on 4.6, you didn't mention it, but has any progress been made on inviting selected guests to, do we need to approach you? Do you need to approach us? How's it going to work? 4.6.
Absolutely. So we have a little pro forma put together so that you know what kind of information we'd like, or the children would like from councillors. I believe Councillor Lane has already approached us and has received the pro forma. If you email myself or Maria, then we'll be able to send you the pro forma and then also let you know of upcoming dates that you can attend one of the meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I can say, having attended the meeting, that it was really beneficial to me when I went to a meeting. This was a while back, and I'm sure it's actually improved even more. So I think it's well worth it. So I have another question from Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, actually, just a comment, and congratulations on the team wanted to focus on mental health awareness that I believe you're taking through to the next meeting. I don't suppose there's any update on that at present, other than just to say very well done, because I know it's an important issue for young people at the moment.
Thank you, and I'll pass that feedback on to the Children Care Council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen, Councillor Lane. And then I have Co-optee Sue Stepney, who wants to ask a question.
Hello, I'd just like to ask about 4.5, about when children get new social workers. What's the sort of time scale on that? Because I think that's really important for children. When they get new social workers, it's quite daunting for them after they've got a relationship with the social worker they've already got. And I think this is a brilliant idea to introduce them to their new social worker. And I just wondered if it was going to be a long way off, or is it in the pipeline to happen soon?
So this came up following the comment at the last informal corporate parenting committee. And the suggestion was that young people could get involved in a design of a card, an introduction card. We took it to the Children Care Council, and they've actually issued a challenge to social workers to come up with their own pro formas. They didn't think there needs to be one template. They want each team to come up with something, and they're very interested to see some of the examples at the profiles at future meetings. So this is something that could be put into place very quickly because there's no set template.
Thank you, Sue. I think it's really important that the children feel that they've got that power now to be able to do things and challenge, which a few years ago that wouldn't have been the case. So to have that now in place is really beneficial. I don't see any other hands raised. So the Corporate Parenting Committee is asked to note the contents of the report and raise any queries that they have with the lead officers. But at the moment, I don't see any queries other than congratulations on everything that you've been doing. So thank you for your report.
Thank you very much.
We move on now to item 6, the annual health report. Can I ask Catherine York to please present this report? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So the report gives an overview of health for the most of the year, almost coming up a year. And hopefully it sort of gives a really good flavour of how things have been. But obviously the NHS has faced extreme challenges over this year. But healthcare provision has continued, albeit in different ways, depending on the service. And if services have been paused, they've resumed, as soon as possible, and any backlog of people waiting, children and young people waiting, has been managed. As Nicola's already said, from the health assessment point of view, they've been undertaken on a virtual platform, and there's been some real positive feedback from some of the older young people who might ordinarily, be difficult to engage with their health assessments and not want to be actively involved. But because it's a sort of more acceptable platform to them, they have engaged with those, and that's been really useful. And that's something we want to take forward, the learning from that, and how we can continue to work in a virtual way for certain children and young people, or when they find themselves in different situations, we can use all the learning that we've had from that. Some of the other challenges have been dental care, because of the high risk nature of dental care. Emergency care for dental situations has always continued, but it's the routine care that was proving to be a challenge. Services are getting back on track, and we've also got a good link with the dental practice at Ely now to help support that. And SDQs, completion of those percentage wise really dropped, because previously they would have been completed at the time face to face in an appointment, as the report says. As we move back to face, we will see an increase in those again. But just to bear in mind that they form part of an holistic assessment. So it's not, we're not totally reliant on the SDQ to help us inform about emotional wellbeing. There are other measures in place. And those were the main things I wanted to bring to your attention, really. Dr. Aslam was here, but I don't seem to be able to see her on the screen now. But I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, Dr. Haslam had to leave. She will be back later on. So if we have any questions for her, we can keep them for her. I don't see any hands raised, but what I want to ask is there anything that you've been doing because of COVID, something that you've been doing different that you think would benefit by continuing it moving forward?
So I think the health assessments is definitely one of the things, but also some of the other services that have been using virtual platforms. That is one of the biggest changes, I think, for all of us, but certainly for health. And GP surgeries are doing sort of virtual consultations as well. And those things that mean that maybe somebody can be seen quicker, or if, like we say, the older young people who wouldn't ordinarily have engaged, if they're happy to do that, that gives us another option. And then using that platform, you can build up a relationship. So if we do need to then see somebody face to face, they're much more likely to engage. So I think that's a really, really positive thing. And also, particularly if we've got any children or young people that are placed out of area and the health service where they are really not able to meet the needs of the health assessment requirements, it is an option for us to consider doing that remotely as an interim measure, and then getting the local team to follow up face to face. So again, it means that we may be able to identify health needs sooner rather than delay things.
Thank you. I do have a few hands up now. So first of all, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I was just going to ask about SDQs. So I know it says they were being emailed home to carers. So I just wondered, was that kind of as a PDF in an email? Because I know in my sort of working life, I found it hard in the last year with this whole, we have to email things home, and people are like, well, how do I print it off? Have I got to scan it? And actually, if I type the questions out into something like a jot form, I've had far greater success. So I just wondered if any kind of like e-version was being looked at that might help, because I know we all kind of, if we just have to click on a screen, we're all much better at doing it there and then, aren't we, than wondering what to do with a document.
So the team was sending out about 2 weeks before the health assessment the document as a Word version, not a PDF version, so that they could do it online, or they could print it off and return it. But I think it's like a lot of things. If you get a lot of things through the post, paper-wise, the tendency is to think, oh, I'll do that later. And actually everybody's busy, and our foster carers are really busy, and they've had children at home more and things. So there's different pressures. So we sort of understand that it becomes more difficult for them to get them returned. So what's happened is that we've worked with our social care colleagues to look at trying to improve on that and encouraging foster carers to return them. And then if they're not there, we do give them, the health teams do give them out at the health assessment. They then send them again following the health assessment with the action to have them returned and scored after. And obviously that's picked some up, but in terms of where we were before, we're still quite low. The lead nurse, I've asked her to start sending them out a little bit sooner, so at 3 weeks, and then remind at 1 to 2 weeks in the meantime. But what we do envisage is as we get back to more face-to-face, that will improve a lot again, because they'll be given at the time of the appointment. They fill them out there and then they can be scored.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. We've got now Sue Stepney.
Hello, yes, my question's about emergency dental care. Very often when children first come into care, their teeth aren't in a great condition, and they're often in a lot of pain, but they're in such trauma that they don't show that pain like we would see it. And trying to get an emergency dental appointment for a child in care when they are in pain, and they are, but they're not displaying that as most children would, doesn't happen. It's very difficult, and it can take months before that child actually gets an appointment if you can't get to your own dentist. And there is a specific instance where a child has had abscess and been refused an emergency dental appointment. So is there not a way we can make sure that children in care do see a dentist not long after they've been into care, to make sure that there are no underlying issues with their teeth? Thank you.
Okay, so I will bring Nicola in on this, but just first of all to say that dental practices, NHS dental practices will register children. So now that services are returning to normal, that should happen. We are aware that pre-COVID there were some issues around getting all children registered because of capacity, but emergency dental treatment is the exception, and there are always emergency dental services available, and we should be able to get our children seen. There is sometimes a difficulty with practitioners understanding the needs of children that are traumatized and things, so that is a particular difficulty, and I would really ask that so the social worker for a child could contact me individually so we can work for that, because we also have community dental services who are trained further in managing people with difficult emotional issues and things.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Catherine, just to draw your attention, please, to 4.4.3, where the performance dipped in both August and December. In your experience and others, is it a pattern that might reoccur in these months, or is it purely coincidental, given that they're traditionally holiday months or periods of low activity? What any particular reason for the dip in performance other than those you stated? Is it
So obviously I have outlined what the exception reporting showed, but I have liaised with the lead nurse for the service as well, and she said in December there was some sickness amongst the paediatricians at that point. And when you look at the August data, although they weren't meeting the 20 days, 5 of those health assessments were done within 3 days late, so 23 days. So it was about capacity at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question and the answer. Councillor Ayres.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, can I just go back to the dental point, Catherine, please, because I did notice in this report there was talk of supporting the needs of vulnerable children and young people, that people could go to Ely, and that seemed to me a long way probably to go, because I'm sure we must have some NHS dentists in the Peterborough authority. So I don't know. Anyway, can I just probably ask if that could be looked into? But I also wanted to raise the point about, having read the unaccompanied asylum seeking children paragraphs, which I thought were very interesting, and was quite upsetting to read some of the things that they present with when they come into care, not least with the sort of skin related issues, tuberculosis, organ harvesting, all these things. It must be pretty terrible to deal with. But I just wondered in particular, I thought the blood-borne virus screening could be very important for everybody, including, of course, the young people themselves. And can I ask whether that invariably happens? And also, what do you do about all these how they present with these pretty awful things that they come to us with?
Yes, so at the initial health assessment, there's obviously a full holistic assessment, and the paediatricians really take a detailed history as much as possible. Because there's often not a lot of history, then there's the routine things are put in place automatically. So the blood-borne virus screening happens, immunisation programme, if we don't know what that young child or young person has already had, or there's an uncertainty about it, we just start the programme again, because there's no contraindications to starting it again, and it's safer practice to do so. There's a service that manages the blood-borne screening, and any things that need treating are treated. So everything is in place there. For the blood-borne virus screening, there were some, not delays, but the service was put on hold for a short while, and then people were caught up, so young people were caught up in terms of the screening. And as I say, Dr. Aslam will be undertaking an audit of the pathway in May time, so that we can just make sure that everything is happening as it should happen. But we've not got any indication that it isn't. The process is certainly appear to be working. So it is just about an assurance that everything is where it should be with those. Just going back to the point about the dentist and Ely, the reason it's Ely is because we've been working with NHS England colleagues, dental colleagues, to try and raise the awareness and escalate the issues that we were experiencing. And as part of that, the particular dentist in Ely works with NHS England and offered the service. So yes, it isn't on people's doorsteps, but it's for those children that can't be seen anywhere else. So if somebody's individual dentist they can be registered with a dentist elsewhere, but if they can't get an appointment, that particular dentist and his team are more than happy to see the children and young people. So it would, in most instances, it might just be a one-off appointment with that practice, and then they would resume care with their local practice.
Well, thank you for that. And can I just ask whether, because I read that some of these things that you've just been mentioning are offered, and do you always get consent?
For consent for treatment or consent for referrals?
Consent is obtained by the services. But I just wanted to make sure that always happened for this, like TB being checking for that, and parasitic infections and things like that. Do they always require consent at the time?
Yes. Yes. Consent is integral to healthcare provision.
Well, even when you're very young, Catherine.
So we get consent from either the corporate parent or from the child's or young person's parent, or whoever's got parental responsibility. That's dealt with through the social worker as the child comes into care, and is renewed as necessary. And if it's a different procedure or something different, we do that. And we review it and repeat it. And at the time of treatment, we always make sure we have a young person's consent. We wouldn't, even if for a younger child, if they were resistant to having something done, we wouldn't just do it. We would treat them as an individual, as we would expect everybody to be treated. We work really carefully with children and young people to support them through procedures and treatment. And if a young person is old enough to understand and be able to consent for themselves, then we do that as well, even if we've already got consent via corporate parent or parent, whoever's got parental responsibility, we still give them that opportunity to consent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have a question from Nicola Curley.
Thank you, Chair. So it wasn't a question, and I think I was just coming in to try and support Catherine a bit around the Ely dentist, but I think she's addressed that. I think just to reassure Councillor Ayres, I think you're particularly talking about our unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people as they come into the country. They are often quite traumatised. They have had terrible experiences, and sometimes they are a bit reluctant to initially engage with medical assessments and interventions. But that's part of what we're doing when we first accommodate them, is having those conversations, trying to support them in understanding how it will help them for us to be clear whether they do have any illnesses that need treatment. And generally speaking, we are able to do that with their consent, and that's absolutely fine. And Catherine's absolutely right. We need to think very carefully. Some of these young people have had things happen to them that make them very anxious and worried about being forced to do anything. So we are very careful around that. But I'm not aware of anyone who was actually refused appropriate assessment and treatment. Sometimes they don't keep up with their medication because they're young people. But generally speaking, they do have all the treatment that they need.
That's excellent. Thank you for that confirmation, because it was quite, I thought it was quite worrying to think how they arrive and how they're managed. And presumably you have to sometimes use an interpreter.
So we frequently need to use interpreters, and we're very fortunate in Peterborough that we have a particular provider where we tend to look to place young people, especially when they first arrive. And we do have young people tend to come from a range of, not quite a small number of countries actually. So what we will try and do is place young people with other young people who do have similar languages. We do have some of our workers share those languages, but then yes, we will also use interpreters to support them, particularly if we've got complicated, health conversations to have, where none of us have the right words for all these, long medical things, and so we'll sort that out. But I think Dr. Aslam perhaps wants to come in and might be able to expand a bit on that. But yes, we do use interpreters regularly.
Yes, thank you, Nicola. Dr. Aslam, you've got your hand up as well. Thank you.
Yeah, just to sort of reiterate what Nicola and Catherine were saying, in terms of the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, when we drew up the pathway, where consent was integral to that, and not only for taking the blood samples and the samples, but also sharing results with the people concerned. We make sure that they agree to their results being shared with health teams and their GP. So that's also part of the consent process as well.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more hands raised, so I want to thank you for presenting the report, and also for the questions and the very good answers we've received. We are asked to note the contents of the report, so that has been done, and also confirm positions and appointments of corporate parenting champions on that item. So we'll now move on to item 7, which is a report on the final structure for the clinical offering for children in care. So can I ask Alison Benito to present the report, please? Or whoever else is going to present? Yeah,
okay,
Alison,
thank you. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. So just a couple of highlights from me, because you've all had the report and I'm sure that you've read it. So as a brief recap, you recall the clinical service was previously delivered by CPFT. After a lot of thought and consideration, the decision to bring all practitioners together was made, as we believe that a single integrated children's clinical service for children and young people is more likely to be able to respond quickly to changing needs and priorities. The changes that were proposed in Cambridgeshire required a formal consultation to take place, and this ended in January of this year. This was not necessary in Peterborough since the posts concerned were vacant. What I'd like to highlight to the committee is that during this period, clinical services for individual children and young people in care in Peterborough were commissioned on an individual basis, which did mean that more urgent needs for individual children in care could continue to be met, and that we will continue this arrangement until we're able to recruit to our permanent posts. And we do also now have interim clinicians working within this space as well. So another thing that I just wanted to highlight was it's fair to say the resource for PCC has remained the same. However, we've been doing lots of work to ensure that the referral pathway is as slick as can be to ensure that interventions are time limited and targeted. We envisage that any clinician will work with an average of 10 to 12 foster carers at any given time, and we will continue to signpost children to other services where appropriate. Within the report, there is detail about the delivery and the model and how that will look. We will, of course, review our effectiveness by seeking feedback from our foster carers, children, young people and staff regularly, and refine and review our processes where necessary. And just to say as well that since writing the report, the vacant posts are now out for advert. So we're hoping to get a really good response to the advert so we can recruit permanent staff. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. At the moment, I'm not seeing any hands raised. I'm just wondering, are we getting enough people coming forward to actually apply for the jobs, the vacancies?
So we've had a number of interim clinicians who have applied to work on an interim basis, but the vacant posts have only gone out to advert yesterday. So we won't know yet, but we are confident that we will get people applying.
Yeah, no, thank you. I do have a question from Councillor Ayres. Councillor Ayres.
Yes, thank you again, Chair. I just, Alison, I just wondered if you could just explain this framework that you mentioned in paragraph 4.6, this delivery that the clinical team will employ. Presumably that's when we get these clinicians on board, isn't it? The two covering the two vacant posts. I didn't quite understand what that involved. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
So are you talking about 4.61?
Yes, I am. Yes, and there's a little bit of explanation below it, but can you just tell us a little bit more about it? Because I wasn't quite sure how it would work. Okay,
so what we know is that, you know, children that come into care, what we know is that they arrive in their placements with established behaviour patterns, based on their relationships with their previous caregivers. So when we talk about a trauma-informed approach, and that's what the actual framework is and the model that's going to be used by the clinical team and is currently being used now, it's about supporting our carers to have the ability to understand their children so that they can offer sensitive and reflective parenting to help their recovery. Because what we know is traditional parenting techniques may not work for these children, and foster carers and adopters need to be helped to develop alternative therapeutic parenting techniques to help build their resilience. And the clinician will work very closely with the foster carer to support them to develop these techniques. And as an easy example, if a child has entered into care and their previous experience was neglect, being constantly rejected, if the child was playing up, let's say one evening, and the foster carer said, go to your room as a sanction, that might reinforce the feeling of rejection for the child. So it's really about helping the foster carer to be curious about the behaviour that the child is exhibiting, and then kind of using different sanctions.
Yes.
Does that help? I know that was a very simple example, but
thank you very much for that. Yes, I think I do understand it a little bit more, and I can see how important it is as well. Yeah. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else's hand up, but I'm just wondering, Alison, if those carers are getting any kind of educational rather than, or is it just somebody going in and saying, try this technique or try that technique, or are they getting a proper educational lessons in how to treat each situation so that they're not inflaming the ACEs as such?
So what would happen is at the start of any piece of work, if you like, there would be like a formulation to look at what the issues were, and a plan would be put around the child and the foster carer. But also what's going to happen is there's going to be a really good increased offer to our foster carers of training. And one of the trainings we know has been really successful is the Foundation for Attachment Training course, which is a 6-session programme to help foster carers to nurture attachments with their children, and it is all focused on the therapeutic parenting as well. So they are going to be receiving lots of training that will also support them caring for children that have been and experienced trauma previously.
Thank you. I was just wondering, are there carers that come in that are particularly interested in that area of care?
I think Nicola or Fiona might be able to answer that better than me.
Nicola's already got a hand raised, so maybe you can add to that. Thank you.
So I'm very happy for Fiona to talk more directly about foster carers, and I hope what committee can see is, I think the next item we're going to talk a bit more about what's happening and the changes with the fostering service and the RAA. So hopefully you can see how this is joining up a bit. So I think what we're hoping to be able to deliver as a service is quite a holistic offer. So Alison has made massive changes and improvements to the clinical offer and tied it up to offer it more resilience across both local authorities. And obviously we need to get the people into post, but then we will be hopefully delivering that quite effectively. But we're also conscious that we needed to improve and enhance the learning and development offer to our foster carers in Peterborough particularly, and that there hasn't been a refresh of the training being offered to them for a little while. And that is something that Fiona's been doing a lot of work on, and she's going to nod now, a lot of work on and helping to set up. And we also want very much, and I hope Stephen, is aware of this, committee are aware of this, fostering committee are aware of this, is that we want very much to involve foster carers and our more experienced foster carers in helping us to deliver some of the training, because it is about enhancing foster carers' skills. We will never have enough psychologists to go around every single child we have all day of the week, but what we have is a lot of very dedicated and supportive and caring foster carers who will wrap around our children all of the time. And so what we want to do is to try and continue to enhance and support their skills, dealing sometimes with some very, very troubled and traumatized children, where it is really a very long and difficult journey to help move them on and move them forward. So we are working on a wider offer to transport that, but Fiona, I think, will come on to that in a bit more detail when she talks about her report.
Thank you. And you've answered the question in that the more the people that have been in care longer, looking after children, are actually passing on their skills, which is, for me, it's something really important that is happening. Stephen, you've got your hand up as well. Thank you.
I was just saying talking about the training. I've obviously dealt with children like this. Do they work alongside schools as well, as I was asking, and you get virtual schools involved? So again, you can have all the training at home, but if the schools aren't on board as well, so do they work alongside the schools as well with that training?
So unfortunately not. It is specifically training for foster carers, but I take your point, and it's something I could certainly have a think about with Fiona and Nicola, in terms of, it's something I'd have to have a think about, but this training is specifically for foster carers. But I do take your point that, the whole system and network working around the child needs to be kind of all singing from the same hymn sheet. So I kind of get your point, really.
Yeah, thank you.
So I will take that away and have a think about it.
Yeah. Nicola, you've got your hands raised. Is that a...
Yeah, so sorry, just to add into that. So it's absolutely, Stephen, critical. So one of the things we're trying to do with the SDQs, so if we think back to Catherine's report, is to try and link up what a child's emotional health and wellbeing needs are that go into their PEP. So that's one of the things we're trying to do. But there is, and committee will be aware that there's actually quite a bit of money coming from government to try and enhance the offer for children's mental health needs in schools, particularly after the pandemic. And we will be working with the virtual schools and working with Dee to look at how we can try and not necessarily replicate exactly what we'll be offering to foster carers, but to very much try and work in a similar way with children and young people in schools, so that again, schools may want to use traditional methods of discipline, but actually for our children, sometimes that really isn't effective, and to help them think about different ways they can approach things. So absolutely, it's a really valid point, and we're trying to do that join up. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Nicola. I don't see any other hands raised. So Alison, thank you very much for that report. It's interesting. It's something that I'm really interested in. So yeah, I'll be watching that one. We now move on to item 8, and that is the report to confirm the new regional adoption agency and fostering structures. So can I ask Fiona to please present that report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. There are a few parts of my report that I wanted to highlight to everyone this evening. Firstly, in regards to our fostering services in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, we have launched our new fostering service on the 1st of December, which, as I've stated in my report, helps us to combine some activity, which for us provides a good opportunity for us to do more, such as we've just been discussing, the training for foster carers, but also to improve the quality of and build resilience in our fostering services. So the changes to the previous separate services, I've defined really into 2 main points. So what we have done is we've brought together teams operating across the 2 authorities, and that's regarding the recruitment and assessment function of the service, the fostering service, quality or function. The core roles and function of our fostering services have remained. That's really important to stress. For example, Cambridgeshire staff will supervise Cambridgeshire foster carers, and Peterborough staff will continue to supervise Peterborough foster carers. I've detailed the specific arrangements in the report and happy to take questions at the end. But in terms of the Regional Adoption Agency, I'm really pleased to confirm that again, we launched the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Regional Adoption Agency on the 1st of June. The Department for Education has supported us to develop a local authority hosted regional adoption agency. And we really want to maintain close links with children's services and fostering services in each authority and increase the pool of adopters so that we're really in the best position to secure adoption is in their best interests. Again, as with the fostering services, I've detailed the structure within the Regional Adoption Agency. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Fiona. I have Councillor Robinson with your hand up.
Thank you. So I see that the government has published some reports that review the new RAAs, and that actually it was full of lots of good news. But one thing they'd said about was kind of a little bit sometimes tricky around transition of when they're created and kind of the, sort of culture change and information sharing system alignments. So I just wondered, since kind of beginning in December, how's the transition gone, and have there been any hiccups, and are they smoothed out by now, or is it still early days?
So when I wrote my report, what you see doesn't really reflect the enormous amount of work that has taken place, both by the staff, with the support of foster carers and the wider system as well. Wholesale changes in service structures are always challenging, aren't they? There definitely is a whole gambit of challenges from IT, as you've said, staff, I guess learning how to access different systems than they've accessed before. We're busily putting together all our performance indicator data sets, which will look very different than they did previously. And of course, that culture change for some staff and for some foster carers as well, and also for some of our doctors who are already on a journey with us, is significant. But on the whole, I think everybody can see the benefits of the new structures. And like I said before, the opportunities that they bring for us, really, for sharing that experience from across both authorities. And obviously, in terms of fostering with Stephen and Sue here with us, hearing the voice of foster carers in both authorities, and that will really help us to shape our service going forward.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you for the question, Councillor Robinson. I have Councillor Ayres with a hand raised again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Fiona, I'm just wanted to say, because you mentioned here about effective multimedia marketing and how impressed I've been with the marketing that has been continual almost. and I think that's very, very necessary in the attempt to find good foster carers. It's brilliant that you are actually doing that, and I wanted to say that publicly. And I can see that that's going to be much the case because you'll be going for marketing in the adoption area to get potential adopters as well. Is that the case? Can you tell?
Absolutely, Councillor.
Yes, and
well, we're very
sorry.
No, I was just going to say we're very fortunate that we have a communication services.
Yeah.
So in adoption in the RAA is very similar to the offer in fostering.
Yes, indeed. Because I think I think.
Councillor Ayres, you're on mute now.
God. Okay, sorry about that. Well, I got the impression from some of the figures that I see that we don't have very many adoptions going on in Peterborough, and I was rather hoping, because I think it's so important for certain children, and particularly older children, isn't it, to actually try and get adopt people who will adopt. And I just wondered how we compared then, because you talk about the national and local indicators, and you're going to be doing some sort of comparison. Do you have a view on how we compare in Peterborough with the nationally, or indeed with Cambridgeshire, in the terms of getting children adopted?
I'm sorry, I really lost some sound then.
I'm asking about how we compare with the national figures in terms of getting children adopted, particularly older children, because I had the impression that we didn't have very many adoptions.
Yeah, so my understanding in relation to Peterborough children, we are faring very reasonably well, actually, councillors, and I know that we will have the adoption annual reports coming to committees shortly in the early summer, I believe.
Right.
So we'll set that out very clearly.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ayres. I don't see any other hands raised. So thank you very much, Fiona, for that report. And I can see us working more and more across between Cambridge and Peterborough in this area. So it's good that we're working to get the same systems, so it's easy to integrate. So thank you very much for that. And we have, as we've been asked, is to raise queries with the lead officers and make any recommendations. I haven't heard any recommendations being requested, but thank you very much for your report. We now move on to item 9, which is performance data for children in care and care leavers for January 2021. Can I ask Nicola to please present that report?
Thank you, Chair. So I think this is the usual information. So you have the report just with the numbers in terms of the different kinds of categories of children in care. Obviously the data is a little bit behind. So as of the 31st of January, we had 368 children in care. And then you also have the scorecard, which in my version, so I do apologise if you similarly have, is slightly corrupted. So it's squashed some of the numbers together. But it's the usual scorecard, which tells us numbers of children in care, average caseloads, which continue to be okay, a little bit higher than I would like. So we do need to try and reduce those. But actually, we are pleasantly surprised by the figures around our children in care population, because I think we had anticipated with the pandemic that we might have seen a more significant increase. Our numbers did go up a little bit by about another 20, but they have come down again. We're not sure that is a position that will remain in the longer term, but certainly at the moment, our care population remains quite steady. Our statutory visits are, as usual, we have also been doing virtual visits, and I'm sure Myra can give you a bit more information on that if you would like, about how we do those and what that means for young people. But essentially, it's a reasonably positive picture, I think. Delays in adoption, just to be clear, it's not necessarily about whether we have adopters or not. There is also a little bit of a delay currently in the courts around adoption hearings. So we are slowing up. So children would be placed with their adopters. So for the child themselves, it doesn't impact, if you like. But in terms of us, they remain children in care until there's actually an adoption order through the court. And there are some delays now because of the pandemic in respect of achieving those orders. But I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Nicola. And the first question will be coming from Councillor Robinson.
I'm very good at that fastest finger first thing. So actually, Nicola, you've answered a little bit. I was looking at the adoption figures, and a bit like Councillor Ayres raised, but it was really useful to hear that actually this is maybe about a kind of a backlog of them being finalised rather than a kind of a dip in interest. Because it was just that interest I wanted to ask about. I'd seen nationally in the news that actually lockdown had created a surge of people interested in adoption. I think maybe they were taking stock of their lives and things while they're spending so much time at home. So I just wondered, have inquiries from potential adopters increased here? And with all this kind of great comms work, like Councillor Ayres said, has that seen any kind of uplift? Are we maybe looking that there might be some more adoptions in the pipeline than we generally sort of see per year?
So I think the overall is that, yes, there has been greater interest, and also in fostering. So there has been greater interest in both local authorities. And what Fiona's created is a much, what's the word I'm looking for? Slick's perhaps the wrong word, but a much more, put together recruitment and assessment service, which is able to process inquiries more effectively. I think the issue for us is that we need the right kind of adopters. So lots of people are interested in adopting. I think when we talk to them about what does that actually mean, and the fact that we are quite often not talking about little babies, we are talking about 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds who come with additional needs and have had very difficult backgrounds. There's potentially, they don't necessarily go through all the process. So what we do measure, and I'm sure we can talk about in more detail at a future committee, is there are different measures in terms of how long there's a stage 1 and a stage 2. So it's you know, how many people are we able to convert from stage 1 to stage 2? How many people go to panel for approval? Are they the right adopters for the children we've got waiting? So there's all of that kind of thing. So there has been an increase. There was a little bit of a delay in processing assessment for adoption, and some of that was a little bit to do with the RAA being developed. Some of that was a little bit to do with staffing, but Fiona has picked all of that up and has that all on track and moving ahead in a very timely manner now. We do sometimes then have, perhaps with our slightly older children who do have more needs, they may be placed with the prospective adopters for longer. So you can apply for an adoption order after 3 months. That's right, isn't it, Fiona? In a nod at me. 3 months, I think. But for more complex children, it may well be 6 months, sometimes even a year. So that delays it as well. And then, yes, we have now got the problem with not being able to get hearing dates. So it's a combination of things. It is also more difficult to get placement orders in the first place. So those are the orders that allow those are the orders the court make that allow us to place a child for adoption, what's called placement order. And that it is very difficult to reach that threshold. So it's a combination of things. So yes, there are people out there who want to adopt. It doesn't necessarily mean that our children get adopted, but hopefully, yes, in the long run.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Nicola, just looking at your staffing levels on the scorecard and your establishment and your caseloading, where would you like them to be? You did mention they had them. That's just the first part one. Where would you ideally like them to be, given that, you know, hopefully now you're getting more permanent staff? If I can ask them all, and then you might want to come back to them, I wouldn't be doing my role properly if I didn't ask about the placement stability, almost twice that of the target. And the other one is going on to the care leavers with a pathway plan in place is below the 95% threshold. I was just wondering whether you could just talk me through those, please.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll answer on the cases, but then I think I will ask Myra, who sits very patiently and doesn't often get a chance to say much, to talk about the placement stability and the pathway plans, because I know she's done a lot of work on both of those areas. So in terms of caseload, there isn't an exact science to it. So it does depend on the nature of the young person and the type of placement and how long they've been in care. So a very settled 15-year-old who's been with long-term foster carers, you know, someone like Stephen, for a long, long time and is doing very well, is not necessarily a particular, you know, it's not a huge piece of work for a social worker. Whereas, you know, 3 siblings who've just come into care, whose placement is breaking down, and they're, you know, we're maybe needing to move them all to different placements. That's a lot of work, isn't it? So it's not an exact science. 18-ish, 15 to 18 would be where I would quite like it to sit. So it's just a little bit high at the minute. But the really positive news is I was talking to Myra this afternoon, and we are going to be, with our new recruitment, I think 0.5, wasn't it, Myra? 0.5 of a vacancy, which is the best staffed we've been in the children care service in a very long time. So actually, it is very positive, and we have a very stable senior management team, and we recruited to our service manager post, which I think you'll remember had been vacant for a little while. So it is a very strong management team. We've got very good social workers now, and yes, so that's a really positive, good news story. But let me ask Myra to talk about placement stability and pathway plans.
So good evening, everyone. Particularly in terms of placement stability, this has actually dipped over the last year. We have put a lot of work into this area in terms of, I think I have maybe talked in other forums around stability meetings and bringing resources in much earlier to stabilise placements. In terms of interrogating the data that sits behind this performance figure, there have been some particular cases of young people where they've had multiple placement breakdowns, and that has very much been about their particular behaviours, their particular challenges, and that certain placements have really struggled to actually support them. I do actually see that as some of this year as a little bit of an anomaly because we haven't been in that place before. But what I will say is that I am anticipating that is a bit more of a blip than I would normally have seen, and I anticipate going to the new financial year that should improve. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a cough there. So that is actually, I have actually been looking at this, and obviously Councillor Jones and I have actually been talking about this at length over the last probably 6-8 months. I have broken that down much more. It is quite a small cohort. The other area to remember is that actually as our numbers of overall children actually drop in terms of children in care numbers, actually this percentage actually looks bigger. And that is about how that is calculated in terms of performance information. So that's why it's actually looking worse than it was probably 12 months ago, because 12 months ago we were around, I think, 2.5. So it looks like quite a significant drop. But I have actually the same systems that have worked previously are still working, but we have had some particular challenges around certain young people who have had, as I've said, multiple placements breakdowns, and that has absolutely infected this performance indicator. But Councillor Jones, you asked something else, not just about stability. Can you just remind me?
It was the plan. It was the
pathway plans, Myra.
So in terms of pathway plans, we have had some challenges in terms of pathway plans over the last quarter, and some of that has actually been about being virtual and being able to work alongside our young people. So we have had some challenges in terms of completion of pathway plans. We've got a new team manager. She and I have actually been working together in terms of identifying outstanding pathway plans to actually close those down. I'm anticipating as we go back to being face-to-face over the next few weeks, that actually my PAs will actually get out and actually start seeing those young people and actually doing the pathway plans face-to-face with them in terms of those that are overdue. So it's not something where we have been particularly before. We've been in a much better place. I do anticipate this will actually improve because I've seen that previously.
Thank you. Thank you, Myra. Just something that Nicola said before made me smile. I was once talking to a couple who'd adopted 3 siblings. I think it was 4. And I said to him, what was it like? And it was a very dour South African. He said, it was like somebody took the pin out of a grenade the day they arrived. Wonderful description.
I genuinely believe, actually, our children in care, they are characterful, and I really think they make our society very interesting in lots of positive and maybe not so positive ways. But I do genuinely believe they are really interesting people. So I'm really glad to hear that adopter felt like that, because his whole world must have been so much more interesting once they arrived.
You had to be there moment. You had to see the look on his face, but they loved them to bits, and they've settled very well.
Thank you very much. Stephen, we have you next.
That was just it was great news today. Today we've had quite a few new carers come through. I'm just wondering what is the percentage now of reliance on agency compared to PCC carers? And the second part to my question is how many children do we have placed outside of the county that are PCC children?
So I would come to Fiona, but I think she's possibly needing to take a call around that. So I think generally speaking, we do reasonably well with that, Stephen. So we do have more children placed out of area and with agency carers than we would like. But actually, particularly, and I think we want to acknowledge again, I think how fantastic our in-house carers have been over the last year. So I've certainly heard other local authorities expressing a lot of concern about how many of their children have needed to go out of area, actually, and we haven't had to do that. Obviously, we have, we're a small geographical area, so we do have some of our own carers are actually physically based outside of Peterborough. So we do have some carers who are over the Cambridgeshire border, but also over the Lincolnshire border. So technically they count as out of area, but they are Peterborough carers, if you like. So we've done reasonably well with that. What we're conscious of is that we have had some natural things like people retiring from fostering and people moving on, which, you know, we want to keep everyone forever, but we do have to let people retire eventually. And what we haven't had as much as we would like is the replacement of that to date with new carers. But there has been that, you know, that's why we've done the piece of work. We have got the refreshed offer. We have changed the rates and brought that together. And Fiona is now in a position where she's excellent. She's back with me, where she's in a position where she's needing to find people to allocate assessments of new carers too. And I don't know, Fiona, do you have a sense of how many we might have coming through to panel in the near future, just roughly?
Well, I know certainly today, Nicola, and I do apologise, my internet's quite unstable, so I seem to be flickering in and out. But I do know today, Nicola, that we approved 3 new households for Peterborough. So I am getting the sense that we're beginning to see movement through. Yes, it is fantastic.
Fiona, I want you on the phone. Again, I think sometimes we miss a trick, because obviously, you know, I'm one of the carers that's come through today, one I recommended, so I'm very, very pleased about that. But sometimes we miss a trick. We don't use our existing carers to find other carers. Because again, the reason the young lady that started caring today and gone into that is the fact that she's seen how it isn't. You know, people get the wrong idea of caring sometimes. She's seen how we do it. She's seen the children we look after. And that's encouraged her to go fostering. And I think sometimes we miss a trick by not using our carers, our existing carers, to bring on new carers.
So I think I would completely agree.
Yes, Stephen.
Sorry, Fiona, go on. Sorry, Fiona, go on.
No, thank you. I was just going to say, Stephen, I totally agree, and Nicola said that as well. And we do need to look at a greater incentive for foster carers to support us in our recruitment as well. And I think absolutely one of the things we want to do is to bring foster carers with us earlier on in the recruitment of foster carers. So maybe coming to meet foster carers or prospective foster carers who've made an inquiry to talk through what it's like about being a foster carer, for example. And I think for people who are thinking about fostering, the person you really want to speak to, isn't it, is the people who are doing it.
I mean, we did use some hotels last year, and I went to a couple of meetings to talk to prospective foster carers, which I really enjoyed, because, you know, and some of the things you can just base it and you say, these children don't come wrapped in cotton wool, because sometimes you get carers that think the children will come all wrapped in cotton wool and be lovely, which most of them are, but some aren't. I think sometimes they do prefer an honest answer, and I really enjoyed that. We seem to stop doing that, though. You know, obviously with COVID, it's been difficult, but we seem to have stopped bringing carers into the recruitment side of things.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's something that Fiona and Nicola can look at in the future. But thank you for the questions. I've got 2 more people. That's Councillor Ayres, then Councillor Lane. So Councillor Ayres.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at these statistics, I did notice that we've got 20 children in care under the age of 1, and I just wondered whether that was a high number or not. And are these the children that very frequently will go for adoption, Fiona? What's the sort of the norm, if you like?
Nicola, are you happy for me to answer this one?
Yes, I think, Fiona, that's fine. Lynn, sorry, we're just pausing slightly because the children in care is Myra a bit, but yes, do they go for adoption is Fiona. So sorry, we're just getting a bit muddly. But yes, go ahead, Fiona, because I know you know the answer.
So Of course, Councillor Ayres, you know, what we want for children is to live in their, you know, with their birth families, where it is absolutely safe to do so. So whilst there may be, you know, obviously safeguarding concerns that have brought those very young children into care, you would hope that the family safeguarding teams can work closely with the families so that they can look after their children safely. And when, of course, that isn't the case, then for those very young children, yes, adoption in the most part would be the care plan.
Right, thank you. Can I, would you mind, Chair, if I also ask another question? Because the amount of children we have in care, as I've heard Nicola say, and I do know, has stayed relatively static and is, I think, well below other areas and sort of comparable local authorities. And do we still put that down? Are you still operating the family safeguarding, Nicola, that we've talked about in the past in the Corporate Parenting Committee? And is that still working well?
So yes, Councillor Ayres, and thank you for directing us to who should answer which bit now. So yes, we are. So I think we would still say that we are very successful in the family safeguarding model in Peterborough. Like I said, we did go up to about 396 children in care at one point, and we have come back down again. But even at that peak, we were still much lower than our statistical neighbours in terms of children in care. And we do think it's very much about a really concerted and coherent offer that we make to children and their families through family safeguarding, which is all about trying to avoid children needing to come into care in the first place, and also making sure that we don't get repeat referrals. I think the bit that we are slightly concerned about, and it's sort of outside of corporate parenting remit, but we do know that our numbers on child protection plans have significantly increased during the pandemic. So that's where we're really seeing the impact at the minute. And the bit that I think is relevant for committee is that the more eventually the number of children you have on a child protection plan, if that continues to go up, you will then start seeing children in care numbers going up. So it's a sort of a graduated thing. So we are concerned about that. We have audited and checked who's going on to child protection plans, and we're very confident that these are necessary and important, and we continue to work with them through the family safeguarding model. But the reality is that some of those children are will eventually, despite our best efforts, come into care. So that's where we're just having a little bit of a warning and a little bit of a concern about that. But yes, generally speaking, we still have very, very positive results from family safeguarding. And we have lots of other local authorities ringing us up now and asking how we do it. And could they come and, well, not come physically, but could they have virtual conversations and talk to us about how we're doing it so effectively? So yes, it is working very well.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions, Councillor Ayres, and thank you for the answers. We have Councillor Lane next, please.
Thank you, Chair. And Nicola, can I ask, it's to do with the very last graphic on the second page of the scorecard, where it indicates that there's 8 care leavers, 19 to 21, who are in unsuitable accommodation. I dare say there's always going to be someone, but is that a worrying trend? Do we have any influence over that, or are they there through choice?
So thank you, Councillor Lane. So this is a very small number, and I think what's helpful about that graphic, even though it is a bit squashed up, is it does give you the numbers, because it just reflects that. So the issue with suitable and unsuitable accommodation is that is a national definition that we can't change. So, for example, if a young person is in custody, that is deemed to be unsuitable accommodation.
Of course.
And obviously we can't actually change that. That's a decision the courts have made. and they think it's very suitable accommodation. So we have usually, that's a very small number, so it's usually 1 or 2 young people who may fit that category. It's frequently young people who perhaps want to live in a particular area, and the accommodation that we think is more suitable and we have available is perhaps in Peterborough, but they maybe have been placed elsewhere. So going back to the earlier issue about out of area, they may have been placed elsewhere, so they don't want to come back to what would be more secure accommodation. And then we do have 1 or 2 care leavers who have a lot of challenges, and we are just not able to engage with despite our absolute best efforts. So it tends to be a combination of those things. And if you think about it, that can easily add up to 8 people. So
with everyone.
So it is a trend that we're keeping an eye on, and I know Myra is looking at closely because we certainly don't want it to increase. But it is very small numbers, but it's usually those are usually the reasons.
They just we will provide for all children warm and comfortable homes, and most cases suitable accommodation. Just their first steps into adulthood to be found in unsuitable accommodation, but that's probably through choice or a route they've taken, as you've just explained. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Lane, and the answers. I would just like to ask Nicola, in relation to the courts, because we have the Nightingale courts. Without those, do you believe that the court procedure for adoption would be a lot higher, or the time before they can be adopted?
So the Nightingale courts are a very recent addition, and they don't really apply to children's work. So what we've got in the family justice system for children, they're calling those Blitz Courts, which I'm not particularly keen on. I would probably prefer Nightingale courts, but they are, if you like, sort of pop-up courts in particular parts of the country where they've got real backlogs in terms of care proceedings generally. So our experience, so it is very differentiated across the country, and there is actually a data gathering exercise going on at the minute that we're contributing to around where the blockages are in the family justice system. Private law proceedings, for example, are really struggling at the minute, but there are some areas where they aren't even getting interim care orders heard, only emergency ones, immediate things, and they're not able to get to final hearings. So decisions aren't being made for children. So that's where the Blitz courts are sort of focusing. For us, we've been very fortunate, and I have to acknowledge actually our lead judge, who got the hang of the virtual technology very quickly and actually pushed that very hard. So we've been very fortunate in actually, we have only lost, I think still, and I'm talking about actually both Cambridge and Peterborough, we've only lost 2 final hearings in the whole year of the pandemic, which is actually phenomenal. So that's really good. So we are still able to get to decisions for children. Hearing dates are starting to take a bit longer, so we are getting a little bit concerned, but it's really just the adoption hearings where we're seeing a real issue, if you like. We have raised that with the court, and they are looking at whether they can put that into some of the Blitz court things, or whether they can carve out some court time locally. I think Judge Davis would say that it's not a huge worry at the minute, and she would probably prefer to chip away at it. But we are revisiting that with her in terms of the overall numbers. So it's good overall. There are some little sticking points. Yeah.
My thought process around that was about making sure that we haven't got children in a particular position where we need court, but you say that we've got emergency courts anyway. So no, I'm really happy about that. I don't have any other questions for you. So we've been asked to note the contents of the report and raise any questions about it, and I think we've done that well today. So thank you very much for that report. We move on now to item 10. Item 10 is members' issues. And this is for members that are not part of the core Children in Care Committee membership, but hold corporate parenting responsibilities. And they're invited to raise any issues that they have with regard to the services provided to children in care. And I don't see anybody else here or anybody raising their hand in this part. So we'll move on to the next item. The next item is the date of the next meeting. So the next meeting dates will be decided at the annual council meeting on the 17th of May, 2021. So that is the end of the meeting. So I'd just like to thank everybody for attending tonight. I would like to thank everybody that's presented and taken part in providing us with the reports and all the questions that we've had. So from me, I'd like to say thank you very much and good evening.